So I'm going to introduce now our presenters. We have Heather Stamp-Nunes, who's our instructor at School of Ocean Technology at Marine Institute and who is with us now remotely. So this is Heather online. We also have Georgina White, the interim assistant head, School of Ocean Technology at Marine Institute, who's actually with us in person today. So without further ado, I'll let them take over and we'll get started.
All right, thank you, Lisa. All right, folks, so as Lisa said, I'm Georgina. I am in an interim position as the assistant head at the School of Ocean Technology. However, I stepped right out of a faculty position into that position, and I'm probably stepping right back into my faculty position because it is interim. So I have been actually working at the Marine Institute for about 18 years now through a variety of different roles in almost all of our programs. So I'm just going to take a moment to let Heather introduce herself and then we'll get started.
So hi, everyone. Great to be here with you, although remotely. So I myself have a 20+ year career with the university, although not there full time anymore. I'm continuing to teach at the School of Technology and have been teaching there for the last 6-7 years, I guess. However, I did start my my career at the university at the Marine Institute. So it's wonderful to continue to get to work with Georgina and all my colleagues there, and looking forward to our time today. And wonderful to see people online who I've worked with in the past. So hi to everyone.
All right, so yes, welcome to the people who are in person. Hi, Brian. And those people who are online. I can't see you yet, but we will probably switch our cameras up and change things up. So it just happens to be that Heather was going to be out of town at this time. So we said, well, talk about being innovative. We're going to do a tag team with one virtual and one in person. So staying with our conference theme. So today we're actually going to do, I'm going to give a little bit of a brief, very brief kind of guideline around the Marine Institute, kind of what we look like, talk about our certificate in leadership and how then we're using a variety of different learning activities throughout that program specifically. We're going to link right back to a lot of the things that our keynote speaker just spoke about with regards to making meaningful learning experiences, creating that reflection in the classroom, and kind of give some examples of what we have been doing at MI to encourage that innovation. Okay, and there is going to be a time that Heather is going to run a group activity. So hopefully you'll have your pens and papers ready. And we will do a little bit of a breakout activity and provide an opportunity for you guys to do some reflection as well on your teaching and on your learning. So Marine Institute, our structure. So for those who aren't familiar, the Marine Institute actually has 3 different schools, one being the School of Ocean Technology, one is the School of Maritime Studies, one is the School of Fisheries. Within those schools, we have designated applied research centers. So there is a lot of active engagement with industry, and all of our programs do have what we call industry advisory committees, where we meet with industry to figure out what their needs are so that we can then better service industry with our graduates, okay? So how does a certificate of leadership link into some of these programs? Well, leadership is that common thread through all industries. Right? So we train students, they then go out, they work in industry. However, eventually they all become ideally leaders or managers. Sometimes our managers aren't our leaders, right? And sometimes our leaders aren't our managers, right? So allowing and encouraging those softer skills and that development in leadership throughout entire programs is what is necessary and key, really, to have ideally successful coworkers and managers and leaders in all of our industry. So the Marine Institute did notice a gap in these kind of softer skills, and hence we created our certificate in leadership. So our certificate in leadership is designed for undergraduate students, people out in industry, looking to get those skills. Sometimes people find themselves as a manager and no type of leadership skills, right? Normally, leadership is then based on what their intuition is and their past experiences. They're not always great past experiences. People don't always have great leadership role models, right? So how do we get those people with the foundation of leadership and wearing those type of hats that we want that inclusion in our workplace, that collaborative environment. How do we encourage that and how do we develop that? So just to kind of form the discussion, so to give you a little bit of background on the program, our program does have core courses and then we have electives. So our core courses are listed here, and as you can see, the foundation is kind of creating that baseline knowledge of leadership in general, okay? A special topics course was designed specifically actually by Heather, so I'll do another shout out to her. But in that special topics course, there's things like team development, change management, specific modules on EDI-AR, right? So some of these key topics that we're all facing in our workplace, but a lot of times we just don't have the right tools to face those, right? When it comes to our project management, so that's that whole idea of start to finish, planning tools, what it looks like from a proposal to carrying out a project, thinking about aspects right down to risk management and safety, right? And then actually presenting final products, okay? Entrepreneurship, getting that thinking state-of-art thinking cap on of innovation and what that looks like and startups and that type of thing. And then what happens is that as we're going through all of these core courses and the electives, is that it's becoming clear in all of the assignments of these core courses of making that meaningful learning. Why are they learning that? How is it reflective for an individual student? Because my definition of leadership and how I look at leadership and what I value in leaders is different than all of you, right? So leadership is one of those key concepts that everybody views it differently. And what I value is going to be different than what you value, right? So how do we lay that framework of creating that meaningful experience for each student? And it has to be individualized because being a leader is very individualized, okay? So here are some examples of some of the activities at which we do, keeping in mind that universal design of learning. So the why, the what, and the how of learning and making it meaningful for our students. So for example, in our very first course in our certificate program, it is all online. And how do you create that meaningful connection in the online world, right? We do video assignments. It was actually brought up in the last talk, in this morning's talk, about creating those video assignments, allowing the students the creativity and the flexibility. And the very first assignment is, what is leadership to you, right? Because what happens is them defining what leadership is to them, then that's at the very core start of their course and their program. We get them to redo that at the very end because we can track how they learn, how they develop, and how their perspectives have changed based then on their lived experiences through the program. And a lot of the students who are doing this program are out in industry and they are working and they're saying, this is helping me in my day-to-day job. They're doing courses on conflict management, communication, talking about things like EDI-AR, right? Change management, organizational change, right? So things that we are all facing and they are living those experiences as they're going through the program. So a key aspect of us as facilitators is to draw on those experiences so that they can then reflect and then edit, change accordingly, and then hopefully have the knowledge to go forward, right? So we obviously do case studies in some of our courses in the special topics. Another shout out to Heather here with regards to the discussion leaders. So we all have, and if you've ever taught online or facilitated online, we have discussions, right? What we do in the special topics course is each week we assign a student to be the discussion leader. So they have to facilitate the discussion. They have to keep it going. They pose the questions and keep that engagement because we are basically forcing them to step into that leader role because that is what we're trying to accomplish here, right? So providing the ability and the idea of creating those tasks for students to actually step up gives them that responsibility, but also another opportunity then to reflect, right? How did that go? Did you find it difficult? What are some alternate ways, right? What could have you done better or different next time? Things like creating their brand statement. So that is them actually taking a reflective moment to what do they value as a leader? How are they presenting themselves to the world? Everybody probably have seen on resumes about, you know, the little summary statement. How do you present yourself to the world, right? Idea of the DISC profile, we're going to touch on that a little bit in our activity, but understanding a little bit more about them as a leader and what that means to work with others, right? Knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. And here we also do a personal development report. So taking a guided reflection on you as an individual, you as a leader, you as a team member, and how are you going to actually develop that using SMART goals, right? Then linking right back to the capstone course, that is actually another reflective paper, but what they're doing is they're going back there. There's a forced reflection to go back through the program and say, how does your video now change from day one, right? Do you view leadership different, right? Ideally, they probably will because they have more knowledge on that, right? Service learning. So I don't know about anybody else, but I am an active volunteer for the past, I don't know, 30 years. So, and a lot of people do volunteer, right? And that is an absolute way to encourage community engagement, developing people, but people don't often think about themselves as a leader when they're acting as volunteers because they're not getting the paycheck for it, right? But service learning is a key aspect to developing our community leaders. So we force our students to either draw on their volunteerism, and if they don't have volunteerism, encourage them to go out and seek an organization at which they feel they would like to volunteer, right? So it gets them in that framework of creating that service learning, okay? And then another, like I said, a reflective paper, linking that we do have discussions through each one of our courses with regards to EDIAR to encourage that type of mindset throughout our program, because that is key in all of our leaders. All right, over to Heather. Nope, you're muted, Heather. See, we knew we would get
Sorry
there.
about that. Yes, of course. After all these years, you think you know. Am I good now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So just to kind of reinforce exactly what Georgina was saying, the roadmap for the program is very deliberate. We do see the evolvement over students and their mindset around leadership throughout the entire program. And just as Georgina was talking about, you know, leadership means different things to different people. So what our goal is that we want to be able to have all of the students in the program be able to have an opportunity to really, you know, create that self-awareness and have reflection touch points all throughout the program so that their own style of leadership that's unique to them can really begin to grow over the course of the program. So one of the activities that we do at the very start of the program is we have each student engage in a DISC workplace profile. This particular workplace profile talks about how you show up as a leader, you know, how you're likely being perceived by others, what your communication style looks like. So we carry that thread of our own holding up the mirror and creating self-awareness in terms of our own style right throughout the program. So what we'd like to do here with you today is to just do a little tiny tip of the iceberg activity of what we do with the students throughout the program. So I hope many of you either have a pen and paper or use your phone, whatever you want to. We're just going to walk you through a quick activity. And what I have here is a poster where we have two sets of categories, okay? So the very first one on the top is categorized as fast-paced and outspoken. So when I think of this, I would think of somebody who's really active. Perhaps they're really bold, they're really really dynamic in terms of how they're showing up with others. And on the other end of this page, we have the words cautious and reflective. And when we think about cautious and reflective, I think about somebody who perhaps is a little bit more moderate pace, right? Perhaps not as dynamic as up top, much more thoughtful, probably has a calm demeanor, a little bit more methodical and a little bit more careful. What I would like you to do is just put a little circle if you think you're fast paced and outspoken or if you're cautious and reflective. One or the other. Can't get trapped in the middle. Okay. I know what the conversation is going on, but I'm a little bit of both. And we have lots of conversations about that in the course and throughout the program. Okay. So fast paced and outspoken or cautious and reflective. So now if we could hit to the next slide, that would be great. So now on the next slide, once we've got that up and running.
Click on the mouse.
Perfect. Thank you. We have on my left is questioning and skeptical. Okay. So when we're thinking questioning and skeptical, I'm thinking about being logic focused. I'm thinking about being objective, perhaps challenging the thoughts, thinking of new ways that we could be doing things, right? So questioning and skeptical, whereas to my right, we have accepting and warm. Okay. And when I think of accepting and warm, we can think about this in terms of being really people focused, having a lot of empathy in terms of how we show up, being receptive with others, being agreeable, and just kind of that really people focused, lens. So now I would ask you to choose either questioning and skeptical or accepting and warm. Quick little moment, make a mark on your page.
Yep, the back slide was you were either fast-paced or outspoken, or reflective. And now you're either questioning and skeptical or accepting and warm. And I know you all think you're in the middle of all of it.
That's right. Sadly, we don't have enough to, that's a whole session on its own. Okay, so let's hop to the next slide. So now, we saw about where you came from, whether you chose, depending on what you chose. Now, if you chose fast-paced and outspoken and questioning and skeptical, you would be classified as what's known as the D, the dominant profile. So, Georgina, I don't know if you could just click that there for our D to show up. For those of you who chose fast-paced and outspoken and accepting and warm, you would be called the influencer group. Okay. Those who chose accepting and warm and cautious and reflective, you would be the steadiness group. And those who chose questioning and skeptical and cautious and reflective, you would be the conscientious group. Now, listen, I do this work all the time. I spend, we could be here for a week talking about all of these profiles. We only have enough time to really hit the tops of the trees. This isn't an actual, true diagnostic that you've done the way that we get our students to do. But just keep this in mind for the sake of this activity, where you land in one of those styles, okay? And what we talk about with our students throughout the program is that all of these styles are of equal value. We want to leverage the strengths of all of these styles. From a leadership perspective, we need to have all of these different styles in our leadership pipeline, okay? So this is what we're doing. We're bringing attention and bringing some awareness to everybody in terms of how they're showing up and what their style might be. I'm going to show you a quick little video that will kind of give you a little bit of education around these 4 styles. So if we could make a move over to that video, that would be great. It'll take a moment for the volume to kick in. We've got to go through, get all the legal stuff taken care of first.
What if people had their needs written all over them? If you knew that this person wanted more independence, and that person wanted a bit more reassurance, would it change the way you work together? Would it make your job easier? Yeah, it probably would. But that's not the real world. Or is it? Maybe if you had the right decoder, everyone's needs would be a lot more obvious. It would be clear how to work more effectively together, to be more productive, more satisfied. All you would need is a tool to help you understand where people are coming from. This is DISC, your decoder. It gives you a way to quickly understand the needs and priorities of the people around you. It describes 4 basic styles: D, I, S, and C. Here's how it works. First, everyone has a dot. That dot tells you your DISC style. For instance, if you have a D, or dominant style, you probably drive toward results. Insist on immediate action and challenge the status quo. Most likely, others share your priorities, even though you might butt heads from time to time. Different styles may find this same D approach to be blunt, intimidating, or insensitive. If you have an I, or influence style, you probably approach work with enthusiasm, enjoy collaboration, and take quick action. Others with the I style probably find your energy exciting, even if the two of you are a little too optimistic at times. Different styles may find this sort of liveliness and fast pace to be sloppy or reckless. Or you may have an S, or steadiness style, which means you like to support people, maintain stability, and enjoy collaboration. People with the S style will probably appreciate your patient and easygoing nature, even if that means there's little sense of urgency. Different styles might see you as overly accommodating or indecisive. And finally, if you have a C, or conscientiousness style, you probably focus on accuracy. Use your logic to challenge ideas and seek stability to ensure consistent outcomes. Others with the C style will like that you prioritize getting things right, even if the two of you can get bogged down in analysis. But for people with different styles, this cautious pace may feel dry, sapping their natural energy. Now, in the real world, it's not always that simple. Your dot can be between 2 styles, such as in the area between I and S, and you can have 4 or even 5 priorities. For example, in addition to collaboration, enthusiasm, and support, you might also share the priority of accuracy with your C coworkers. The point is, even though you need to recognize your own DISC style, you also need to know where the people you work with are coming from. Whether you're simply connecting with others, solving problems, or working through conflict, you'll have to stretch from time to time. And using DISC as a guide, you'll have a better sense of when and why that sort of adapting is so crucial to not only your success, but the success of everyone in your workplace.
Okay, so that's one of the activities that we take the students through. As you can see, it's really giving them an opportunity to hold up the mirror, create some self-awareness, have lots of reflection time, and begin to tweak and refine their style over the course of the program. And it's very applicable to the real world, which is, as Georgina mentioned earlier, these leadership skills is really important, and something where we definitely saw that there was an opportunity to be able to help our students with as they move out throughout their academic careers and into the workforce. So what we'd like to do now is we would like to be able to break you up into small groups. I know that online here we have a good number. We could probably be one larger online group. And we have a number of questions that we'd like you to have a conversation about within your groups. The first one is, how does your understanding your style help you better understand how you teach up and how you're showing up for your students and with your colleagues? The second question is about, in what ways do you think your style influence your interactions with your students, with your colleagues? How is that landing when you're working with others? If you were to think about your style and your engagement with your students and everyone else, how might your style inform your approach when you're in the classroom, with whether it's classroom management or whether it's with student engagement? And then we'd like you to think about how you leverage understanding of the different styles to perhaps create a more inclusive and supportive learning environment for our students. Okay. So what I'd like to do, Georgina, maybe you can quarterback the in-person group, and I can take care of the online group. And if we can all come together with an online group, that would be great. And will we still have access to the questions up on top?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll keep the questions there. And don't worry if you don't get down through every single question, but we'd really like you to have a conversation in terms of when you think about your style, how is that landing for you as educators? How is that showing up in your classroom? How can this be helpful for you and supportive for you? Okay, so let's take, Georgina, what do you say? About 10 minutes, do you think? Maybe.
Yeah, 10's good. And Heather, I'm just going to mute our speaker here so that you don't get any interference on your end.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so for our online friends, would be great if we could all start and jump in on the conversation. And I don't want to facilitate the conversation because I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to have this small group conversation amongst yourselves as colleagues. So who would like to kick it off?
Hi, Heather. I'm going to get everybody to come back now. They're very active here, so you might hear a lot of noise behind me.
Oh, you're muted, Heather.
Discussions, but in the interest of time and bringing us back into focus, I do love hearing all the conversations, though. It makes my end of the sound very easy. So I am going to pass it back to Heather just as a discussion on these questions. And then obviously it's your opportunity to ask us any type of questions. Okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Georgina. So we wanted to do this activity with you because although we're doing this for students from a leadership capacity throughout the program, we thought it might be really great for you to get a little bit of a taste of it from an instructor perspective of it and a teaching and an educator perspective of it. So what were some of the common themes, or what were some of the conversations around the room? Would anybody like to share?
I can go, Georgina.
Yeah.
We did all the questions generally, talking about the types of people that you're leading, managing, teaching, working with. Your style changes based on the needs of that group, and recognizing that you can't manage everybody in the same way. So really shifting your perspective. We were saying that culturally there's a difference, and so working with international students is different than our domestic students. And what we learn from experience is that international students might not always admit to needing help, and so when you're managing them, there's an expectation that they know everything, and so approaching them and forcing check-ins and saying, what questions do you have versus do you have any questions? Sorry, I forgot your name, Megan. Sorry, that's Megan's way of phrasing it, which was a great way, instead of, especially younger students or first year students, do you have any questions? With day one, like we ask in every orientation session, do you have any questions? And students don't know what they don't know coming in brand new. So forcing those check-ins, and that's a great perspective, just to shift the way you, read out and make that connection. I think they'll be more comfortable to share than to say, yes, I have questions, versus, no, I don't have any questions.
I used to, in my presentations, I would have the muddiest point.
Yeah.
So in my talk, tell me something that wasn't the clearest or the muddiest for you. Instead of saying, if you have any questions, so they never have any questions.
Right.
Say, what was the muddiest point? Like, what's something that wasn't the clearest to you? And then they would always answer.
That's
Yeah. I've done that in my online courses too, because sometimes students don't want to say it in class. So I just throw up a good old Brightspace, got all kinds of surveys, right? So you can put up a survey and just say about specific lectures or muddiest point thus far. It actually helped me build out my midterms. So.
One of the things we also do is throughout any of the courses that I teach, I offer each of the students at some point throughout the semester, would they like to have kind of like a one-on-one executive leadership coaching engagement? And sometimes those who might be, perhaps a little bit more apprehensive to speak up or to ask questions, they are much more engaged in those one-on-ones, and you can kind of see them post those conversations. They come out of their shells a little bit. So I think it's a great point. We can't be the same educator to all students, right? Because we have to tweak our styles and how we're showing up, and sometimes those littlest, tiniest of tweaks make a huge impact in terms of how we're showing up with others. So great conversation. Anyone else?
It's all about how you ask the question as well, right? Like, the area that I work in as an educator, we don't say, well, why did you do that? Because that's wrong. Can you talk me through what was going on when you know, because I work in simulation, so there's always room for error. Students that are in that environment, so it's not why, but what your head was, you know, when this unfolded. So taking the why out of it and finding another way to ask the question. At least it's been successful with this pedagogy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I think there's lots of conversation around this, and Georgina, we might even be able to create our own little, session where we have it for just educators to be able to talk more about these things, because we find it often does generate a lot of conversation, and very fortunate that we're sitting in a room filled with our colleagues, that we can have these types of conversations and, leverage the experience of one another and learn from one another. So thank you. Georgina, do you want me to punt it over to you in case we'd love to hear if there's any questions that anybody might have about any part of the programming or our approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did talk about a lot today. Oh, you're trying to drive and I'm taking over.
Oh, no.
I know. I told you we'd figure it out as we go. He's trying to change camera angles and I'm doing a song and dance here. So we did a lot about different things. We did talk about some examples that we use to encourage that reflection throughout the program, make it a little bit more student and kind of community centered, right? Drawing on that lived experiences, because your lived experiences, what ideally is actually creating your intuition as a leader, right? So all of your past experiences, that's what gives you that gut feeling when you move forward as a leader. So drawing that out from our students. Do anybody have any specific questions for us about anything that we talked about here today, or have the opportunity to share about anything that you guys have found helpful about drawing out that within your students or your classes? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just super curious if you concentrate at all on generational differences and how you lead or manage and instruct different age groups, because you said your certificate program could be a very varied group, right? So I just wonder if you focus on that at all, because it's become a hot topic or a challenge when you're managing these days. So yeah, there's certain threads that, even though everybody's an individual and not everybody of a generation is the same, I will fully concede that. Yeah, there are some trends and different ways of approaching things, right?
Absolutely. And once again, we are our lived experiences and generational, and when we were born and how we were raised and that type of thing. So in some of our courses, we do talk about in points of the discussion in relation to what are you currently doing. And I know personally, I use the example of that I changed as a person when I became a parent. Right? I did, wholeheartedly. I am way more patient and way more empathetic now, because it just changes you, right? So I have those discussions with the students about specific milestones that they may have found that they've watched change them, and sometimes given them the perspective that now they have changed as a leader and a person as well. Because as you approach the situations, based on your experiences is how you're going to react to those situations, right? And having that ability to kind of reflect and say, why am I taking this to heart? Or what, taking that moment to that power of the pause to step back and take that perspective. I'm not sure, Heather, if you can speak to your special topics, if you talk anything with regards to the generational.
So absolutely, that's a really good question. So what we talk about is, once you get in the workforce, and not even in the workforce, even from an academic perspective, we're often sitting in teams or sitting in classrooms or offices where we have literally every generation and with us. And what are some of those tips and tricks and strategies that we can communicate more effectively, or we can build stronger relationships with those of different generations. And leadership today requires, it looks very different than what leadership needed even 10, 15 years ago, right? So it's always making sure that we're having those conversations, and I find we're having really rich discussions around topics such as these in those discussion forums that we were talking about a little bit earlier. So that's an evolving conversation throughout the program, and one that is really real life, because people see it when they're in the workplace. Oh, right, like I'm working with a boomer, I'm working with the Gen X, and so there's some really rich discussions around that.
I forgot to go to my question slide, right? We're already on the question. Yeah, so anybody else? That is a great question. Yes?
Like, there's a lot of need from the student perspective. Like, how do we accommodate some students, like biologically or naturally, they have an issue in learning? But now what we're talking is just under normal circumstances, like different groups of, whatever going on. But like some kids have, like some students have their own natural learning disabilities. Are they separated from this group, or how do we approach addressing those kind of?
With regards to learning, like accommodations, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So normally as a student, and I know our students at the Marine Institute, students absolutely can self-identify any type of learning accommodations that are required. And that's actually then told to the instructor about what type of accommodations. I know Heather would probably be the same approach as what I would be. Any type, I always say that to my students. I also list that out in my syllabus, that if students feel like they need any type of learning accommodations. And then what I do is then I reach out to the student, respond to them, and provide a little bit of what we kind of discussed about earlier with the keynote, is that flexibility, right? So providing people flexibility. Listen, everyone is not in the same situation, right? So we might be in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. That's the real Marine Institute side of things for you, okay? But because of that, right? So because we're all in the different boats, let's help each other out. So providing a little bit of that flexibility with students with regards to timing, different circumstances. I think both Heather would agree to allowing that, and that has part and part of the communication with your students and creating that rapport, because having that connection and the sense of belonging and that kind of meaningful learning experience with your students, they would know that they would be more than happy to reach out to me, and I could have those discussions with them. Yeah, so I would hope that anybody who is facilitating with the students would offer a little bit of flexibility, because we're not all in the same boat, right?
Georgina, just points on that.
Yep.
I remember when I first came to Memorial, I completed a diploma forest transfer courses. I applied as a mature student. I was not right out of high school.
Mhm.
But I will always remember that my English 1080, I guess it was, because it was first year English. And he was a grad student teaching, but he'd always say, last year in high school, last year in high school.
Yeah.
Last year in high school. 21, wasn't in high school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just using that language, and just assuming that everybody in first year English was going to have been coming directly out of high school. So not taking into account different ages, generations,
Right.
And just kind of thinking, okay, this is the norm in my typical class. And maybe I like I was right out of high school.
Absolutely. Yeah. But Andrea, that is a great point, because a lot of time we make assumptions, right? And those assumptions make people feel a certain way. And as any type of leader, you cannot tell a person how they feel, right? A person's feelings are their own, and you cannot tell a person how they feel. However, you can communicate with people about their feelings and find that out. But if we can minimize things like assumptions in the classroom, right? Because you still remember that from 1080, right? So it's those things that would carry over. All right, do we have any other last minute questions? I think we got 3 minutes left. I know, I am watching the clock. I'm trying to keep us on track. Heather, do you have any last comments?
No last, but these questions have been really, really great. So one of the things that is also a common theme is how we are having students think about, you know, being empathetic and practicing empathy throughout their leadership style, and getting curious and asking questions. And it's really landing with me in terms of the questions that you're asking after this session, that exactly the types of conversations we're having with our students, you're reinforcing the importance of those things by the questions. And just as you are being curious, we're encouraging our students to do that. And that's a key component to leadership.
In the words of Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Absolutely. And mindset is everything. So if you feel that you're a leader, right? But have the ability to reflect on that and always challenge yourself to find your strengths, right? We work on our weaknesses. We all have those, right? But it takes daily to work on those. And we tell our students that too. We are not promising that you are going to be the best leader when you graduate this program, but if you have some type of concept of how to reflect and make yourself better, well, your mindset is already better than probably your neighbor, right? So thank you for your time today.